I'm Scott Al Miller. It is the 14th of March, 2023, and this is my vlog of daily life in Leon, Nicaragua. Welcome to the show. We're here, still not going for long walks, but I'm hoping really soon we're going to be able to get out and get to some new locations. I'm taking one of my last days of completely avoiding long walks. I really have been babying my foot, and a lot of people have asked me about it. So my foot, I think, is doing a lot better. I've been trying to take the medicine every day. I've not been religious about soaking it, but I have been doing that, and I have been very, very careful with it. Now, I'm supposed to be waiting about 10 weeks before I really do anything much with it. That's a long way to go. That's about 9.5 weeks to go, right? So we're nowhere close to that yet, but this is the most that I have given it time to completely rest in a long time. I still notice soft tissue damage. I notice when I walk barefoot that it does feel sore and it's not great. So that is not perfect. It's certainly not healed by any stretch. We're only 10%, 15% of the way into this process. And that's the shortest the process may be. It could go much, much longer. So not thinking that I'm nearly healed, but I've been babying it hardcore, being super careful with it. And overall, I feel like it's feeling a little bit better. I haven't noticed a lot of the problems with it. Now, of course, when I baby it, I don't notice the problems with it because I'm not doing anything with it. It's like, well, my leg hurts when I walk, but now that I'm not walking, my leg doesn't hurt. Well, okay, yeah, that's not exactly healing. That's just avoiding the problem. That might be what's going on with my toes, but I'm gonna try, I hope, in the next few days to go out and go for a walk and not do a long one, but do a few kilometers and give it a try and see what it feels like, and we'll see what the process is. But I don't need to go back and check in with the doctor, so that's a really good sign that he thinks I just need to be really, really careful with it. Do this treatment that I am with this, just this it's real basic. It's like vitamins and some minerals and stuff. It's not like actual medicine, and we'll see how that works. So that is the current status with my foot and why the show has been a little bit on the boring side recently with me staying close to home. I really do want to give it a good chance to heal as best as possible. I don't want to do long-term damage, obviously, and I'm looking forward to doing more and more amazing walks for you guys. So I've got to heal it so that I can do some cool stuff, and I do have some cool plans that I hope to do in the future. Coming up this week, just real quickly, busy stuff. Nothing at work or anything to report on. We are going to be going to the beach tomorrow. I'm not going to film there just because there's never, no matter what I do, there's never time unless I'm actually going to the beach for a filming day. Like, I get there and there's just things to do, right? So I'm not going to even pretend that I'm going to be filming. I'll take the camera, of course. I'll pretend to myself that I'm going to find some time, but I'm not. We both know that that's not true. We both, me and you, the collective people who live in the GoPro. But so today I want to talk about, while we're relaxing here and enjoying a sunset, which for you guys just results in a kind of darker picture, which I don't really appreciate. I wish, one thing I don't like about the GoPro is how it handles the low light, but I needed to get out. I am worried about falling behind on the videos just a little bit, so I'm doing some extra filming today while it's a little bit darker. But it's a beautiful sunset for me. The colors are great. I love how it looks. Of course, I've got my rose-colored sunglasses on, which makes it even better. But it's a beautiful day. And we only hit 33 on the day that I'm recording, which 35 is 95. 33 is much more like 91 and a half, 92 maybe. So it's been pretty pleasant. One of the things I want to talk about, first, a little bit of history. So I grew up in Western New York on Route 63, not on it, but just off of it, on what as a child was the most dangerous corner in New York State, or so I was told. And growing up in that corner, it was always you have to be so careful approaching it or anything, but we didn't really drive around it very often. Like, the number of memories I have of actually driving around that corner are like a handful, because I was always either coming from my house or going to my house, which was on that corner, so you would stop and turn. So we didn't have the experience of driving through the corner. Of course we did at some point, coming from one town and going to another. And if you're looking on a map, it is the big corner between Pavilion, New York, and Geneseo. If you notice, the road comes down and then it goes east. So that big corner where it goes from a diagonal road to an eastbound road that's essentially the corner that I grew up on, the inside of that corner, close enough that I could hear the trucks come down one side. And so the Jake brakes would always be going as they came down, because there's a little bit of a decline as they come around the corner, and then there's a big decline. So it's kind of a hill coming down flat and then hill. I never really thought about that before. And it's a beautiful little spot, and just fantastic views, and such an interesting place to have grown up. And I think that location really contributed a lot to my love of exploring the world, because it was this beautiful, interesting location in the middle of so many things that itself was the middle of nowhere. And it kind of always gave me this interesting drive to be, I find places that are populated really interesting, because I grew up in a place that was so unpopulated, but we could get to populated places so easily that I'm comfortable in them. And it was just an interesting juxtaposition of places that you don't experience very much. And so it really did a lot to make me comfortable in giant cities, in rural areas, in small villages. Like, I don't have a type of place to live discomfort like a lot of people do. A lot of people, if they grew up in a village, you find living out in the country with no one around to be a little bit agoraphobic. Like, there's no people. Oh no, I'm isolated. And big cities are scary because there's just a lot. And like, something about growing up in the country where I did gave me this comfort of different places. Of course, traveling as a child, going to Toronto, going to Rochester, going to Buffalo, and other big cities helps, right? They're not foreign to me. But so this corner that I grew up on, especially, and I can't remember exactly what ages this was, but it was probably somewhere around when I was 14 years old, and I'm just guessing at that. It got so bad that I remember one summer we would walk down, my parents and I. Sometimes we would hear a sound, and sometimes we would just walk down, because, we would go for a walk, because what else do you do in the country during the day? And we would go down, and you could actually watch the trucks flip on the corner. That sounds ridiculous, and that's not exactly what happened, but it felt that way, right? It would be like, oh, I think I heard a sound, let's go down there, or let's walk down and see what's going on. And sometimes you go down, and I remember one time that a huge semi-truck full of scrap metal rolled over, and in one of the houses, its yard was just, the entire thing was full of scrap metal. It was actually, there used to be on that intersection, I think it's gone now, they moved the road because this was so dangerous, right? They moved the road, so a lot of things have changed, but there used to be an old historic one-room schoolhouse sitting there, and it rolled over in its front yard, and the whole thing was just scrap metal. They needed like cranes to move, like it was crazy. So that happened. One time we watched a bus flip over, and there were like people everywhere. I mean, they didn't get run over, just people like, oh, like it flipped a bus, right? They're all a little bit injured. No one was dead or anything, but it was crazy. And so many times we would go down and see accidents that had just happened. Sometimes we would just walk down and there would just be an accident. We had no idea it was there. You just walk down and be like, oh, today's accident is this. And it happened so much. At one time, one of the neighbors' houses got hit. Like a semi just went into the side of his house. He was in bed. It threw him across the house. It was nuts. When I was 16, at one point I was driving to go to what I have no idea what it's called anymore. Pete's Party Complex? I don't know. It was Pete's Charcoal House at the time, and they did line dancing on Wednesday nights. And I used to go down with Tammy Hopkins, and we would go line dancing on Wednesday evenings. It was a thing to do, and so it was in Leicester, but I was coming from Peoria, and I got down to the intersection on my way to line dancing, and this guy was driving a minivan and had a few too many drinks, tried passing people northwestbound, I guess, and he came around the corner and came head on to a semi. And because it was this really dangerous intersection, the semi had nowhere to go and ended up climbing over his windshield. And Paul, who lived on the corner, not Paul from here, just Paul, that was my neighbor, and I pulled up right as the accident had happened, and Paul was in his house and heard it. And I just parked the car and ran to the accident, and Paul ran out of his house and ran to it, and we were the first two. We got there, like, the cars had barely stopped moving when we got to them, and the guy was lodged halfway through the windshield and caught, and it twisted the minivan. We couldn't get anything open, and I went and got a blanket out of my car. We're like, he's bleeding out, so we tried as best we could lean into the car through the broken glass and wrap him in a blanket, which did very little to help, right? And that was my first encounter with an up-close, involved in real accident. Like, I had seen cars, scratch each other before. I had never really been there when someone had an accident, and I had certainly never seen a dead body up close outside, like in funerals, right? But not like as they expired, and certainly had never taken my own blanket out and wrapped someone in it as they died. Right? It was a very traumatic experience, and not to be morose or depressing to my viewers, this was a very long time ago, 31 years ago, and that person probably would have died by old age by now anyway. But this was a really dramatic moment in my life, as you can imagine, and it stuck with me that it was the only time that ever happened in my entire time living in the United States. I have no memory of anything else like that ever, right? And I'm sure lots of people have seen lots of things, and if you've worked in the medical field or worked as a police officer, you see those things a lot. But as a normal person, it's not part of everyday life. You don't really witness that many accidents. And if you live in cities and go on big highways and commute a lot, you'll see more, but it's still rare. When we lived in Panama a number of years ago, early 2015, we were driving on the Pan American Highway, and Dominica talked about how crazy it was. We would watch people just run across the road, just absolutely insane. They would just dart back and forth across the Pan American Highway. This is the biggest highway in the country. People are moving not super fast, but fast, and it was almost like people were playing chicken with the cars. They had overpasses to take, but they weren't taking them. They could wait for the empty space between cars, but they would run right in front of cars. You would see them flash through your headlights. It was nuts. And one day she said, I can't believe with how much we see people flashing in the lights, we don't see dead bodies all the time. And as she said it, we looked over and there was a guy being covered up on the side of the road who had done exactly that and not quite made it. So the timing was kind of impeccable that we were wondering about such a thing and saw it happen in real time. And that kind of gave a prelude into what life is like in Latin America. And I don't know exactly why this is, but it feels like when you're in Latin America, especially here in Central America, that the highway is much more up close and personal for some reason. And I mention this because now partially I spend a lot more time walking out on the road. That is my dog being crazy. Quite some ways away, she is freaking out at a fence, trying to get to me. And I'm out walking on the road a lot. And obviously, there's a lot of people on motorcycles and a lot of people not wearing seatbelts and a lot of people in buses. But I don't know exactly what it is, but it feels like we know there's a lot more accidents here than there is in the U.S. Things are a lot more constrained. There isn't as much space. Things are a little bit more hectic. People don't pay very much attention. It's like people don't have any self-preservation, and you see people just running out into the road all the time on bicycles, in cars, on foot, and it's like, people will stop, and they will see me at the last possible second and slam on the brakes. I'm not worried, and they often do, but holy cow, like if I was in the United States, I would never take these kinds of chances. A car would just plow into me, someone would be looking at their phone, and you'd be gone, just like that, in the first day, right? Like it's weird how little people put in effort to protect themselves all the time. And I think that's one of the things that we see, 5 people on a motorcycle and people just being crazy in how they drive. And the reason I bring this up is because so many times already, now we've lived here for years, but the number of times that we've had a car accident directly in front of our house. And this came up because last night we were in the house and Paul and I heard the collision and we walked outside to see if we could help. And it was just 2 motorcycles who managed to hit each other in the road directly in front of our house, like right in front of our house. And it was the Pedidos Jog guy and someone else, and they just collided and they both fell over and they were just standing in the street, each calling somebody. And so they were fine. And then when traffic started backing up, they got up and went. And so it was no big deal. So it wasn't morbid or anything. It was just 2 guys who collided and scratched up their motorcycles. But I've also had the number of times I'm like coming back from one of my walks doing the show for y'all, and I'll have an ambulance there and they're taking someone away. And I don't normally see anything, but it happens. And when we were on the beach, I had to help deal with someone who had a really bad motorcycle accident. It wasn't much help that I could be, but I had to help with the police and everything. And just there's something about the amount as a normal citizen in the United States, I really never, and no one I knew ever, really ended up in a situation where you were dealing with accidents on any kind of regular basis. You didn't see them. You might see from a distance, you're going down the highway because you do long stretches of driving and you might run across someone who is, you see lights over there or whatever. And it's true, I was driving in Texas one time and I had a car directly next to me, slam into the barrier and go fly up over the barrier onto the highway. Or I saw a car flip over and saw its tires go down in the air while it's sliding on its roof. I've seen that, but I've driven thousands of miles, hundreds of thousands of miles in the United States. I've put on so many hours driving, and here in Nicaragua it's so little, and I've probably seen as many accidents here in Nicaragua as I have in the United States. And you tend to be so close to them. In the United States, it tends to be a distance. Oh, I see flashing lights, and there's someone had an accident and they're there for a long time. Here it tends to be, you actually see it happen, or you have to drive past it and you're close enough to identify the person. And normally it's not like someone's dead. It's just, there's a lot of motorcycles, so you end up with a lot of people who are laying on the ground, clutching an arm or holding their foot or whatever. And you go by and they're right there. You have to kind of inch around them. And partially it's because in the United States, the police cordon it off and everybody's kept way away. And here it's very up close. But there's something just crawled onto my foot while I was standing here talking, and it really got my attention pretty quickly. So I kicked it away, whatever it was. But there's just something very real life, I guess, I don't know, about this up close and personal interaction that you're very likely to have with traffic accidents. And that moment in Panama really kind of gave us a taste for just how much more you are likely to interact with people and things that bump into the car, whether at high speed or slow speed. And one of the things here is everything's very slow. So there's a lot of accidents where people are just getting knocked over or falling on the ground and kind of knocked out or something, but not completely wiped out. Whereas in the United States, cars often disintegrate because they're at incredible speeds. It's not uncommon to have a crash in the United States in excess of 70 miles an hour. Here, it's unlikely to have a crash in excess of 40 kilometers an hour. So it's a very different type of accident, but people are often not wearing seatbelts, very often completely exposed on motorcycles. Many people don't have helmets. A lot of people, you're required to wear a helmet, so a lot of people just put them on top of their head and don't actually pull it down over their face, or just put their arm through it and carry it on their arm. So they're wearing it, but it's not functioning as a helmet in any way. Like, it's absolutely crazy. But there's a lot of that. And so I just kind of wanted to say for today's topic, this is a real thing that in some ways I can connect to my childhood, because we had this, I grew up on this intersection that just had so many accidents that it was mind-boggling that you would deal with it all the time. But I've never actually watched it happen. Like, it didn't really affect me in the same way. And then being down here in Latin America, where we actually hear and see accidents firsthand, I don't want to say all the time, but probably, I mean, to be honest, every month or two, probably come across an accident. And we hear sirens quite often. It's like, oh, I think if I was outside, I would actually see something, and I just don't go out. But for whatever reason, it seems that, and I'm sure that reason is that there are just so many more accidents, right? There's tons and tons of low-speed accidents that happen all the time. If you're in a car and you wear a seatbelt, your chances of surviving here are extremely high. The dangers to people in cars going at reasonable speeds with seatbelts on is very low. But all the people on bicycles, the horse-drawn carts, the people who are just walking on the road, the number of times you're driving down the highway in total darkness, and there's a person wearing black from head to toe that's not even looking at the road. Everybody's walking on the wrong side of the road, and they'll just flash out of the darkness, and they're in the road. You have to dodge them. It is so high that that's just a normal thing. Every time you go for a drive somewhere, you're looking for people and animals all over the road. And in the United States, you don't get that. The idea that, like, oh, you're going down this highway, a deer could jump out, is like, yes, that could happen. But there's still not that many deer on the road. But here, there's things all over the road all the time. If you're looking out into the darkness, you can be assured that that road is full of things. Dogs, cats, people, horses, cows, you name it. It's out there, and it's waiting for you to drive into it. And people just aren't taking the precautions. They're just not really worried about getting hit. It's very different. It's such a huge cultural difference. And it's one of the reasons I don't want to drive here. It's very stressful. It's very different. It's not something I'm used to. So dealing with it is hard. I don't have a problem with, like, I don't like see an accident and go, oh no, that like gonna bother me later. I don't have that, but like, I don't want to be the one hitting somebody, right? Or I don't want to, even though a lot of these accidents are low speed, so it's not that big of a deal. Oops, I knocked someone over, I scratched up their car, they're probably not that angry. It's still, there's just so many accidents. I don't want to be in a position where maybe I hurt somebody, or maybe I'm at fault, or I just have to explain why I'm not at fault. Like, the whole thing is just not something I want to do. So it's one of the reasons I want to avoid driving whenever possible. But also, it's this incredible amount of diligence you have to have when you're driving, that in the United States, you can pass out and drive for 100 miles, and the chances that you'll actually crash into someone, okay, if you did, that would be pretty high, but you could theoretically make it. Here, if you were to blink for too long, you're going to hit somebody. There's never a moment that you get to glance down at a phone and check a text message. There's never a time that you can get distracted or spend time changing the song on the radio, or just zone out for that millisecond and forget to be watching in every possible direction, because at every moment you have to be completely diligent in a way that we never have to be in the United States. Not that we shouldn't be, right? It's such an extreme challenge. It's much more like a video game, right? In the United States, driving is a matter of challenging your ability to fight exhaustion. Incredibly long distances. Can you keep yourself awake long enough to make it on your journey? That's the primary challenge, and it's a painful physical challenge. But at no point do you have to pay that much of attention. And here it is the opposite. Instead of it being long and tiring, it is short but incredibly intense. And at every moment you must be actively dodging things everywhere. And that makes it much more like a video game. Oh, you're going to sit down and play a video game for 15 minutes. It's a racing game. There's like things flying at you, and Mario's in front of you dropping bananas or whatever. That's actually what it's like. Things are being dropped in the road in front of you. People falling off of motorcycles in front of you. A real thing is that people are being so careless that a motorcycle or a bicycle will come up alongside of you, try to pass you, hit something, and fall over in front of you. That's real. That's constant. So it really does make for a very different world. And it's a piece that I've noticed. I've really noticed that there's just so much more connection to things happening on the road compared to what we're used to. Anyway, that is my opinion on that. I find it interesting, and it's so hard to really grasp why it feels so different, but it really does. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like to support the channel. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAllenMiller. That comes directly to me. It's kind of like Patreon. Help support the channel with all the things that we have to do to make this possible. And as always, share in social media. Tell your friends about the show. Get down in the comments. Let me know about your driving experiences, your accident experiences here in Latin America or elsewhere. What have you discovered? How's it different for you? All that. And thanks for joining me. I'll see all of you tomorrow.